We started in 2022. We have a list of great speakers, which we have today. Juan E. Méndez. We have Mars Tidball-Binz and Sabrina Butler, who is also a death row exoneree in the United States. Translation is available. Participants can click on the interpretation button and choose which language they want to hear. We will confirm tomorrow during the technical check-in which languages are available. The participants can only interact with the panelists and the rest of the room through the QA questions box. We will answer all questions at the end of the session. We will try to get to the every question we can. So y'all just bear with us. This event is to provide space for international experts and directly impacted people to present, share, and discuss recent findings and on the issue of capital punishment as a violation of Article 7 of the ICCPR. We want to encourage more research and reports to be published on this issue. The most important thing we want to do here is raise awareness and inform civil society, union members, states, regional and international human rights mechanisms about the evolution of the soft law. Today, we're going to start off with our first speaker, Mr. Juan E. Méndez. I don't see the background. So, Mr. Juan, would you like to introduce yourself? I don't quite see the bio on you right here.
All right, I can introduce myself. But first, I want to thank the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty and Witness to Innocence for this invitation to the webinar on the World Day Against the Death Penalty. I also have to apologize that I will not be able to stay for the whole meeting. And it's a great honor to share the podium, as it were, with Herman, with Sabrina, and with my very good friend, Morris. I am a lawyer from Argentina and now teach international human rights law in Washington, D.C. But I've also been the Special Rapporteur on Torture for the United Nations from 2010 to 2016. And it's in that kind of lapsed capacity that I'm going to talk to you today about death penalty in international law. If we are okay, I'll proceed. I start with the statement that unfortunately, the death penalty, capital punishment, is not outlawed by international law yet. We are in the process and we're going through clear trends towards mandatory abolition, but we're not there yet. The abolitionist tendency can be seen in, first, that many countries are gradually abolishing either de jure, that is by law, or abolishing de facto by not applying the death penalty, even though they have it in the books. But also because international law has established a number of very strict due process requirements if states decide to retain capital punishment, including all necessary appeals, the obligation to provide legal aid for those who cannot defend themselves, and particularly the possibility of legal representation of one's own choice, and the fact, of course, that if the death penalty is going to be imposed, it has to be by an impartial and independent judiciary. Another sign of the trend towards abolition that I'm talking about is the moratorium that the United Nations has asked all members of the international community to suspend capital punishment, and many countries have adhered to it. One of the foremost experts on capital punishment, Professor William Schabas, had predicted a few years ago that if the trend continued, by 2030, capital punishment would have been abolished de facto, if not completely de jure. Unfortunately, we had some setbacks since then. Countries that had not executed for a long time returned to it, like in India, for example. But nevertheless, the trend identified by Schabas still holds. And there are many jurisdictions, including jurisdictions within national states like the United States, that don't have the death penalty and refuse to reapply it. And in fact, it is said that in the United States, the death penalty is really applied in a number of counties, not even states, as a matter of both law and fact. But what we do know is that the death penalty cannot be imposed or executed without violating the absolute prohibition on torture and the absolute prohibition on any form of cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. In fact, there's just no way to say that the death penalty can be legally imposed without violating the prohibition on torture or the prohibition on cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment. When I was a special rapporteur on torture with Morris's predecessor, the late Professor Christoph Heinz from South Africa, we had a consultation to analyze the death penalty from the perspective of the Special Rapporteur on torture and the Special Rapporteur on summary or arbitrary executions. And we both wrote reports on this, and on my report, I basically said that there are two ways in which the death penalty violates the prohibition on torture and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. One is in the modes of execution. Certain forms of executions have been abandoned by all countries in the world. For example, beheading is not used even as capital punishment. And the reason for abandoning it is the cruelty of that method of execution. The same can be said with crucifixion, for example. So a question arises, is there such a thing as painless execution? And we know that at least some pain is definitely inflicted either by shooting or by hanging or by or even by lethal injection, because lethal injection is the pain is disguised by the fact that there are other injections that are applied that don't let us see that the person is suffering. So if it is just impossible to have a painless execution, at least we're already violating the prohibition on any form of cruelty. But in addition, because torture because the capital punishment is the way it is applied in all countries that retain the death penalty includes several other forms of cruelty and of torture. For example, for the most part, people in death row are held in solitary confinement. And solitary confinement, if it's prolonged or indefinite, that is beyond 15 days, has been ruled as itself inflicting pain and suffering associated with torture or with cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. And so just and even if the death row was not in solitary, just the fact that persons have to spend years in the uncertainty of what the outcome of different forms of appeals and due process would end is itself the kind of mental pain and suffering that is also associated with torture or with ill treatment of all sorts. And as I said, they are permanently prohibited and absolutely prohibited. And solitary confinement, particularly the way I described it, has been outlawed by an instrument of international law that passed by the General Assembly in 2015, and that is now called the Nelson Mandela Rules. The old name was the Standard Minimum Rules for the Treatment of Prisoners. So if a state retains the death penalty but has to apply it by solitary confinement and by a mode of execution that exacts some pain, even any kind of pain, both physical or mental, the state would be violating absolute prohibitions that apply to all member states of the United Nations, and that are included in the Convention Against Torture. And in addition, the prolonged nature of the appeals process and trial that leads to the imposition of capital punishment is absolutely mandatory by means of the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. But if we apply the obligation to provide all kinds of appeals with the prohibition of prolonged isolation, we have to conclude that there's no way in today's world to apply the death penalty in a legal manner, that is, in one that does not violate these rules. So if there's no way to apply the death penalty legally, then we need to find that the death penalty must be abolished and must be abolished as quickly as possible. So yes, we can rely on the continued trend that I mentioned before, but it's also important to campaign for abolition de jure, that is by law, either by legislation or by case law. I think we can and should urge judiciaries all over the world to apply these principles of international law, which are mandatory on all states, to determine that the death penalty cannot be imposed or executed without violating cardinal principles of human rights, of international human rights law. I really want to thank you very much for the invitation, and I regret that I won't be able to stay, but I will hear at least my friend Morris. Thank you very much.
Mr. Juan Méndez, I want to thank you for that information. It's really helpful for the people to understand how important it is to understand the torture and the death penalty being intact and how it's violating in so many different ways. Our next speaker is Morris Tidball-Binz, was appointed the UN Special Rapporteur on extra-judicial summary of arbitrary executions on 1st April 2021. Mr. Morris is a medical doctor specialized in forensic science, human rights, humanitarian actions. Over the past 35 years, he has conducted fact-finding, technical assessments, and capacity building mission to over 70 countries in all the regions. In 2022, the Special Rapporteur released a report containing an analysis of the question of the death penalty from the perspective of whether it is compatible with the absolute prohibition of torture or other cruel, inhuman, or disregarding treatment or punishment, and recommendations aimed to ensuring the protection of the right of the life as guaranteed under international human rights instruments. I had the pleasure of meeting Mr. Binz over in New York one time, and I must say he's a very great person, and you really need to listen to what he's about to say. Mr. Binz?
Thank you so much. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Greg.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, firstly, I'll join my good friend Juan Méndez in thanking the World Coalition Against the Death Penalty and Witness to Innocence for organizing this this event and for honoring me to join such a distinguished group of speakers. It's a true and real honor, and I'm grateful and thankful for this opportunity. I'm also very happy to meet, albeit virtually, not only Juan Méndez here, but my colleague Jill Edwards, and it's a great pleasure to see you again, Herman, and Sabrina. Thank you so much for the extraordinary work that you carry out. And Witness to Innocence carry out to raise these issues of shared concern. I would like to start by just saying that today with Jill we actually issued a press release on the occasion of the World Day Against the Death Penalty. Calling on the universal abolition of the death penalty, on the basis that while, as Juan Méndez so clearly explained, international law does permit the death penalty, albeit in very, very limited circumstances. In practice, it is almost impossible for states to impose the death penalty while complying with the absolute prohibition of torture and other cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. And I will speak not as a jurist. I'm not a lawyer, as you mentioned, Herman. I am a forensic doctor, so I'll speak as a physician. What I can say categorically from a medical and a forensic perspective, and as I have argued in my report to the General Assembly last year, is that beyond the doctrinal sort of analysis of treaties, the mere idea that the death penalty does not constitute torture simply lacks persuasion. So much so, for example, that categorically prohibited physicians from any participation in capital punishment. Just last Saturday, in Kigali, Rwanda, the World Medical Association held its 224th session, and and in this reaffirmed its resolution on the prohibition of physical or of physicians from participating in capital punishment, which builds from previous resolutions, including the Helsinki resolution of 2003 about the responsibility of physicians in the documentation and denunciation of torture, and most importantly, the principles of medical ethics relevant to the role of health personnel, particularly physicians, in the protection of prisoners and detainees against torture, from 1982, which in principle 3 states that it is a contravention of medical ethics for health personnel, particularly physicians, to be involved in any professional relationship with prisoners or detainees, the purpose of which is not solely to evaluate, protect, or improve their physical and mental health. And this resolution builds from the recognition that from a medical perspective, the death penalty from sentencing up to execution amounts to forms of either torture and cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment. And in many countries, even before the imposition of the death penalty, the sentencing is often based on confessions extracted under duress. As a physician and medical doctor who has been involved for many years, decades actually, in documenting human rights violations around the world, I have had the opportunity to interview and examine scores of torture survivors. And one recurrent and common and universal element of and expression of angst of the survivors of torture that I have interviewed has been the fact that torture, which is of course physical and psychological in its many forms, impacted all of them, perhaps most significantly through the threats of death, either against the victims themselves and or their families. So the threat of death, the death threats suffered during torture is often recalled and conveyed by those interviewed for either medical and or forensic purposes as a most pervasive element of the torture suffered. And that's precisely what the death penalty is about. So it is a moment of sentencing up to execution. And of course, execution methods, as stated by the Human Rights Committee, is essentially it's virtually impossible to execute someone without inflicting severe pain and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. There is a scientific foundation for this statement, which is growingly substantiated by research into, for example, post-mortem findings of people who were executed. For example, in the United States, doctors Joel Zivot and Mark Edgard found that in more than 3/4 of cases of those executed through lethal injection, the pulmonary edema findings were compatible or consistent with extreme forms of suffering before death. So the idea that death came swiftly and peacefully is absolutely not substantiated by their findings. So much so that their findings actually were considered by courts to either postpone or suspend execution and the use of certain methods of torture. I have called in my report last year for more research worldwide into the effects of the death penalty from sentencing up to execution to further substantiate these findings and these claims, which are already formalized within the medical profession and through the World Medical Association, to extend also to the legal aspects and considerations for the absolute prohibition of the death penalty, as it does constitute a form of cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. And this research, in my opinion, should not be focused exclusively on those sentenced to death and ultimately executed, but also extend to their families, because the suffering of the next of kin, of the loved ones, of the families of death and death row, is also a form of cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, in my opinion. As mentioned previously, one of the worst forms of torture expressed by survivors that I have interviewed and examined was the death threats against their families and relatives. That was the worst form of torture, which actually revives nightmares and creates great anguish, etc., etc. And that's the situation of families of those under death row. And so I do call for more research into this aspect, because in my view and opinion of others as well in the medical profession, the extension of the sentencing and the penalty, in this case a death penalty, goes beyond the person sentenced, which is absolutely against international law. To conclude, I do believe that there is no justification for the death penalty from the perspective of the absolute and universal prohibition of torture and cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment. The argument that some countries raise about this position being a culturally conditioned one of Western world, etc., it does not hold in the face of historical facts. The first country in modern times to have abolished the death penalty was in fact Venezuela in 1863. And if we go further back in time, Japan in the year 724 abolished the death penalty for centuries, as well as the Tang dynasty in China. Let's not forget that the Tang dynasty was a golden age for poetry, sculpture, and Buddhism in that country. So the call for the total abolition is fully substantiated in the fact that from a medical and forensic perspective, the death penalty amounts to torture, cruel, and inhuman and degrading treatment on one hand, and I do applaud the trends for the abolition of the death penalty. Most recently, the case of Zambia and the Gambia, which have abolished the death penalty this year. And also I do applaud the abolition in Malaysia, the abolition of the mandatory death penalty from its criminal law. Thank you so much once again for the opportunity to share this symposium. And please count with my mandate to support your efforts for the abolition of the death penalty. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. You know, you and Mr. Méndez has put so much great information out there. And just imagine that most people like myself didn't realize that torture actually attaches at the time of being threatened with the death penalty in most cases. And it's just amazing how great that so many individuals are working so hard to clarify this issue and bring it to the attention and try to abolish the death penalty when we have others that just seek power and don't want to pay attention to the actual human rights, the humanity of life. So that moves me on to our next speaker. We've talked about torture. Let's talk about the torture from a perspective of someone that's been actually impacted by it. You know, so our next speaker is Sabrina Butler-Smith. She was a Mississippi teenager when she became a victim of wrongful conviction due to false or misleading forensic evidence and prosecutor misconduct. She endured, 6.5 years in prison, 2 years and 9 months of which were on death row. She has since been exonerated for all the wrongdoing. She is one of only 2 women in the United States exonerated from death row. Sabrina speaks as often as she can to the public and media about her heartbreaking and moving story, and also works with the state government to hopefully change legislation regarding the death penalty. She previously served on the board of Witness to Innocence, Texans for Alternative to the Death Penalty, and Life After Innocent with founder John Eldon. She is also working on starting a nonprofit to help women who come out of prison get their lives back and giving them a place to start. Sabrina?
Thank you, Herman. First of all, I want to say thank you, guys, for having me today. And as I listened to the conversation between Mr. Morris and Juan, I was really appalled to know that, yes, it does affect people when they are on death row. And that just hurts my heart, because I know that being accused of something that you didn't do is even worse. So, my name is Sabrina Butler, and I'm the first woman to be exonerated from death row in the United States, from the state of Mississippi. And at the time, I was 17 years old when I was accused of killing my child. My son stopped breathing, and I tried to apply CPR under someone else's tutelage. I was told to apply CPR in the wrong way. So I applied adult CPR to my son, and I didn't know how. So when I did get him to the hospital from where I stayed, they wanted to take me to the police station for questioning. That happened. I went to the police station and was interrogated for over 4 hours with no parents, nobody there to talk to me, to tell me, what to do or what to say, because I had never been in trouble before. So I really didn't understand what my rights meant as a child. I thought the right to remain silent meant be quiet until spoken to. I was scared out of my mind. I was yelled at. They were in my face like they were going to fight me, all this. So when they wrote the statement and put it in my face, they, told me to sign it. I signed it, because I didn't know, what to do. So that's what started them to charge me with capital murder. They charged me with capital murder, and they charged me with a child abuse charge that wasn't even a law until 23 days after I was already incarcerated. So I sat in the county jail a whole year before I even saw my attorneys. I saw them 2 days before trial, never having any preparation, didn't know what I was supposed to do, didn't even know what my son died from. In fact, I didn't find out what my son died from until my second trial. I had an all-white jury, and being the age that I was, when I saw the jury, I knew my life was over. I had never been in any trouble, but when I saw the jury, nobody looked like me. So that, in turn, I just knew. And I was correct. They sentenced me March the 13th of 1990, and my death date was July the 2nd of 1990. So when I finally made it to death row, I was 19 years old. 19 years old, walking into a place like that, you know, shackled and around my waist, my wrists, my ankles, and having to be humiliated, you know, for something I know I did not do. It was the worst thing. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And I was in a cell, a 6x9 cell, no bigger than your bathroom. Sometimes I had rats in my cell. I had to figure out how to stay warm when it was cold and figure out how to stay cool when it was hot. It was horrible. I had no human contact. The girl that was next to me that was on death row at the time, she would talk to me because she was older than me, and we would get down on the floor and talk between the toilets, you know, just for conversation. But the scariest part was when my death date came. That was July the 2nd. Nobody told me that the state had to exhaust all state remedies before they could actually carry out a death sentence. So I paced the floors. I listened for every chain, every sound, because I actually thought that I was going to die. I thought they were coming to kill me. She kept talking to me, and happily, my sentence was finally overturned due to prosecutorial misconduct. He took the jury to a picnic while they were supposed to be sequestered. He talked to all the doctors and nurses in one room. So they already kind of knew what they was going to do before they saw me. I ended up getting 2 more attorneys in my case, Clive Stafford Smith, who started the reprieve over in England. And then I had a Mississippi attorney. They got together, they came together, they found out my son had heart, kidney, and lung disease. It didn't have anything to do with me at all. Nothing at all. My case was never a crime. They charged me with a crime that was never a crime. I went back to court. I had a new jury. They proved my case. I was exonerated in less than an hour. The jury came back in an hour. I was exonerated December the 18th of 1995. But just because you're exonerated, your life don't stop there. Everybody's like, yeah, you know, I'm happy for you. But I struggled from 1995 to 2009 without a job. Nobody would hire me. I'm still struggling at this age I am now. And to say that the death penalty works and it is the right thing to do is absolutely wrong. It is absolutely wrong. And I just feel like we as a human being do not have the right to say who lives and who dies. We don't have the right to do that. And then you say, well, what about the worst of the worst? Well, that's not true. Because if that was the case, anybody that commits murder needs to be on death row. But that's not how it works. It's racially motivated, and it is money for people. And I just don't think that's correct. And I think we need to end the death penalty and figure out another way. It doesn't make sense the way this is carried out. And so I fight, and I will continue to fight as long as I can to show that the death penalty is not what we need. Witness to Innocence has been a profound page in my life that I would never change, because they were there for me when no one else was. And I feel really bad to know that we have innocent people that the system has killed and that is on death row now. And you have to fight for your life. And that's sad. It's really sad. And I just, I thank you guys again for having me. And I hope to do more. And this is my story. My name is Sabrina Butler.
Thank you, Sabrina. And I'm sorry that you had to go through that. Unfortunately, Mr. Benz has some things, responsibilities to take care of. So I encourage that if you have any questions for him, Mr. Méndez, Juan Méndez had to leave. So if you have any questions for Mr. Benz, could we put those in the answering questions chat box first, the Q&A box first? Do we have any questions for Mr. Benz? Well, I do have a question, Mr. Benz. How do we get officials in our states, in our regions, to actually have a conversation around this subject in applying torture to the death penalty? You're muted. You are muted.
Yeah, sorry, I was thanking you, Herman, for that question, and also thanking Sabrina for sharing her your harrowing experience in such a clear manner that sort of fully confirms what Juan Méndez and myself were saying from the legal and from the legal and medical perspective about the experience suffered by those sentenced to death, amounting to or equating to torture, cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, and the impact that the threat of death has on individuals. You described so clearly. I am aware that there have been several instances in the United States where the death and executions have been either postponed or suspended or delayed based on the fact that they do constitute cruel and unusual punishment under the Eighth Amendment, and I do believe as a physician and as a forensic doctor that this reality, this argument needs to be further extended, further substantiated with research to convince categorically those who are still not receptive to these facts. What I'm trying to say here is that the more evidence-based arguments there are to claim that the death penalty in all its forms and from the sentencing up to the execution amounts to torture and other forms of cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, the stronger the position will be to call for the abolition of the death penalty. Let's not forget that let's not forget that torture is prohibited universally. There's the prohibition of torture is absolute. There are no exceptions to that prohibition, and that is an extremely powerful element to argue for the abolition of the death penalty. However, we must acknowledge that there is very little research so far Luckily, some research has been already is underway. I mentioned the research carried out by Drs. Joel Zivot and Mark Edgar in the United States, and there are a few other instances, but still not a critical mass of evidence, of hard evidence to prove beyond reasonable doubt that there is no way that a death penalty can be imposed without violating the absolute prohibition of torture. I think that's a way forward, Herman. And actually, having heard Sabrina today, and having had the opportunity, the pleasure, and the honor of meeting you last year, and knowing about your story as an exonerate, and what you went through, the ordeal, the hell that you went through from the moment of sentencing onwards, and even before, as actually Sabrina shared with us, because she was actually forced to sign a confession under a form of duress. So this starts before even the sentencing. Is something that we have to further investigate and substantiate. And I want to just take the opportunity to mention once again the aspect or the dimension of the relatives and next of kin and the loved ones of those sentenced to death, who actually also go through harrowing suffering. In many countries, not being informed of when and how the execution of the loved ones will take place, and therefore this really constitutes a form of psychological torture of horrible dimensions. So I invite the wider community to step up research into this domain to further convince legislators and the world that the death penalty is absolutely incompatible with basic human rights obligations. Thank you.
Thank you for that response. I have two questions in here. I know you have to go some answer one for all panelists. What hopes do you see today for the abolish of the death penalty?
Can you repeat the question, Herman, please?
What hopes do you see today for the abolish of the death penalty?
Well, as I mentioned in my presentation, the fact that there are countries which are on the right track. Just this year, the case of Zambia and the Gambia have abolished the death penalty from their books is something extremely encouraging. And I mentioned an example of Malaysia, which, while not abolishing the death penalty, did abolish a mandatory death penalty from criminal law, which actually prevents judges from actually considering the possibility of alternative sentencing for some of those sentences. So these are very encouraging trends, and I do believe that we have to support them in the ways that, for example, you are doing through this extraordinary event and webinar, which I celebrate and applaud. But we also have to provide additional elements for the argument that the death penalty is incompatible, absolutely incompatible with international law obligations. And I do call, as I said before, for stepping up research into the effects of the death penalty on individuals and their families to that effect. Thank you.
The next question I have is for Sabrina. I thank you for that reply, Mr. Binz.
Mr. Lindsey, can I excuse myself? I'm actually lecturing right now, and I have to go back to the lecture room here in Argentina. So I thank once again the organizers for the honor of inviting me. And please count with the support of my mandate as Special Rapporteur on extrajudicial summary or arbitrary executions to in calling for the absolute abolition of the death penalty. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So Sabrina.
Yes.
So it's you and I. We have a question here for Sabrina. Could you let us know which gender-based discrimination did you face? For example, did you have access to sex-specific facilities in your prison, etc.?
Did I have access to what? Hello?
That basically is asking, did you have access to sexo-specific facilities in your prison? So in other words,
I went to it was all female prison. Yeah, we had access to that, but as far as what females needed and all of that stuff, that really was hard to, like anything personal or, that was problem getting. I did have access to, at the time when I was there, we had access to the law library, but before I left, they constituted and took it out. So we didn't have any legal help, as far as finding out about our cases or anything like that. I think so. My case, the reason that I was able to get help was because at the time, Mississippi was sentencing a lot of people to death row, and it was unjust and it was racial. I'm sorry. And so a group of attorneys decided to look into it. And that's the reason why I think my case got picked, which rightfully so. And I thank God for that, that it got picked to be looked at.
Okay. The next question we have, I guess I have to help you out with this, is what can civil society do to support families and NGOs working for the abolish of the death penalty?
What we all need to do, like I said before in some of my lectures, I know that certain places have court watchers and all that. Who is watching the judges? Who is watching the district attorney? We need to have somebody watching them, because a lot of illegal stuff is done in the courtrooms, and I think that should be done. I think we need more training for our police officers. I think we need training for our district attorneys. We need to have I think we just need to get in our legislators' faces. I think we as a family, when we have family groups, we need communities to stand up in order to change something. I've always learned a closed mouth don't never get fed. So if we never talk about or never challenge these things that are happening like we're doing now or continue to do, it won't change anything. So yes, I think, and I also think that as far as the doctors are concerned, because in my case, the doctors just did from looking. They just made a decision based on what they saw, and you can't do that. We need training, like the baby shaking syndrome. All of this kind of stuff is being misplaced. People are being put in prison wrongfully for that. So it's a lot of training that needs to be done. And it's just, instead of going on feelings. And I think it's hard not to do that when a child is concerned. But I think that we need more training in all of these areas in order to be able to fix them. We need more watchers.
I agree. And I guess we have lost two speakers, so I guess I'm gonna go into the speaker/moderator's position right here. I am an executive director of a national organization, Witness Innocence. And one of the hardest things for me being executive director is keeping the organization going and keeping our supporters aware of what's going on. And one reason I have the problem with the supporters, because a lot of times we have supporters that's there 1 minute and then the next minute they're not. You know, they go off and they not paying attention. You know, it's like people take interest in this type of topic now and then say, what can we do about this? How can we help? And the next thing you know, they're not dedicated to it, because you talk about it 2 weeks down the line, they're still lost because they haven't been really involved. So what I would say is that one of the things that must be done is that people must stay committed to fighting this issue, to standing by those that's fighting this issue. People need to stay committed to, support can be in many different ways. You know, support can be financially, but support can be signing a petition, or standing out there in a group. You know, support is the way you're able to report a support. But we have to stand together in this world to make this happen. And it seems like the more the number grow, the more breakthrough we're making actually in progress. Do we have any more questions?
Well, I want to piggyback off of what you just said. I think that as far as supporters are concerned, some may fall off, but I think it's because this is a long drawn out battle, which shouldn't be. You know what I mean? They take their time and real quick and swift with punishment, throwing you in jail or all of that, locking you up and throwing away the key or whatever the case may be. If they can do that so swiftly and quickly, how come they can't change what is going on quickly? Why do we have to go through the red tapes? Why do we have to go through all these different changes when it's not that? When you're going through the process of being incarcerated, locked up, and they saying, okay, we charge you with this, we doing that. But you fight forever trying to get out of a situation that they put you in. First of all, I think that's wrong, because it shouldn't be that way. Just as quick as they put you in there, it should be the same way getting out. I don't think that you should do these 30 and 40 and 50 years and all of this stuff before they decide, oh, we made a mistake, my bad, this person should get out. So we're going to let them out of all those years. That is, I think, the problem with maybe some of the supporters. It's the long, drawn out process. People get tired, when it takes so long to do something. So that's why I think that we should change how we do it. You know what I mean? That's what I wanted to piggyback and say. I just think that the process needs to be changed.
I think you can help me with this here. I know you can. And right now we're talking about torture. Let's talk about some points of torture throughout our experience. I know one way was, when we're arrested for something we didn't do is one thing, and that begins to make us anxiety goes so high, fear kicks in, and then to be threatened with the death penalty after that is, takes us to a totally different level of fear and anxiety. I know when I was being arrested, I like, you got the wrong guy. I wasn't really worried about it. But then after I got convicted for something I didn't do, it's like, and then I think about what you said about when you had received a death date.
All right.
It was July 2nd. You didn't know any of that, and you paced around. And then I want to bring out how difficult it is after you've been exonerated and went through what you went through, how difficult it is to deal with that trauma and to stay focused in the communities and do the work you do.
It's extremely hard, Herman. I mean, okay, I'm gonna say, like, once you're tortured and put into such horrible conditions, you get out. Okay, this is supposed to be your life. Everybody's like, oh, he's exonerated or she's exonerated. Whoop-de-doo. Okay, you get out, there's life. You got to learn how to pump gas. You got to learn how to go to the grocery store. You got to learn how to use a cell phone. You got to also learn how to love again. That's one of the biggest issues right there. You're trying to connect with children that you might have, families that you might have. You just don't fit in anymore. How does that work when you're trying to put yourself back together out of all these pieces that you've been placed and put into? My thing is that, why would you do that to a human being and then expect them to function? How can you function when you do that to someone? I just don't understand. And then if you're innocent on top of that, relationships are very hard when you go through something so traumatic such as this. And I just don't think that we should be doing that to our citizens. I just don't think we should be doing that. And to know that you're going to die, you know the date, and ain't nothing you can do. Ain't nothing you can do. I mean, that is such a mind-blowing thing. I can't even explain that. Nobody can know that unless they're in that situation. Nobody can take that from us. You know, that will always be there. You know what I'm saying? And no, I have trust issues. I don't trust people. You know, I have a hard time trying to deal with the police officers and anybody that's in command because of what has happened. And so, you know, we really need to take a look at this death penalty thing, and we need to change it, because if we don't, we're going to continue to have hurt people. And that's what you're doing. You're hurting your citizens. That's what's happening. You're hurting people. And then you want us, okay, yeah, we did this. Now go on out there into the world. And then the world still makes you pay for something that you didn't do. They don't want to give you a job. You can't get housing. You can't, you can't afford to buy this or that. You can't do, and I've been struggling. Everybody's been struggling since we've been out. Where do exonerees fit? Where do we fit? Please, somebody tell me, where do we fit in this?
System wasn't designed for exoneration. And that's something else I want to touch on. It's like we come back out, and it's like most people in society makes it so difficult. Like, for instance, if you go try to find a job, or you go try to rent a house, or they run a background check and they see the murder case still on your background, which does never get removed from your background. And I want everybody to know, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask any question that you like. For me, any question for me, I don't take anything too personal or anything. I just feel like people should ask whatever they need to ask, and if I can answer it, I'll answer it the best way I can. But that's another thing that people don't understand that plays a part of torture. The emotional part from society.
Yeah.
How society looking at people on death penalty that has a death sentence, how society rejects those individuals. God says that my thing is, how can you ask God to forgive you if you can't forgive others? And that's for anything, whatever belief you believe in. It's a true statement. How can you expect someone to forgive you if you can't forgive others? And the thing about it is that I understand some people do some horrific things, some horrible things.
That's right.
And they're in there doing their time for that. They're in there doing their time for that. but I can't understand why people will use to try to kill them to make themselves look better, or to win elections, to show they're a man or woman of power. I can't understand how someone can take a life and just treat it because they done something wrong. Excuse me, because they done something wrong, do the same thing, because execution is nothing but murder. That's all it is. It's nothing but murder. And for people in society,
what you're saying in a sense is, okay, Joe Blow did this wrong, so we gonna kill Joe Blow because Joe Blow did this wrong. But then you doing the same thing Joe Blow's supposed to be done did. So that don't make sense to me. Or you believe in saving a baby's life when you don't believe in abortion, but you believe in the death penalty. That don't make sense. I mean, none of that makes sense to me. How can you show people killing people is the right way? That doesn't make sense to me. If you go in prison, that's a death sentence in itself, to be honest. If you're going in jail for whatever time you might have, that's a death sentence in itself, because you have to sleep with one eye open. You have to protect yourself. That right there is torture by itself. That's all the torture you need. I mean, that's why I don't understand. You build all these prisons and things, and you put all these people in it because that's $1 billion or $1 million, whatever it is, corporation. And we want money. But it makes no sense. It makes no sense. I mean, and then you say this is right. This is fair. This is, gosh, I just don't understand. I really don't. I don't understand.
Can I ask a question? I'm gonna ask this question, but I'm also gonna answer it. Also, is how do you deal with the trauma of being an exoneree? One of my greatest trauma is, I'm still having a problem adjusting to society, because society haven't adjusted to me either. It's like, I try to do the right thing and trying to be I'm married. I'm not. I don't. Being incarcerated so long, I didn't learn how to be a man in society. So I'm teaching myself, and I'm doing what I feel is right. But it's like when people go to trying to do better for themselves, it's like because I was incarcerated before, it's like all the doors slamming in my face, all the doors slamming in my face. People don't know how to deal with someone such as myself. They don't understand the trauma I have, the mental breakdowns I have. They look at me as this person. He's the executive director. He's a great speaker, but they don't look at the inside of how this has affected our lives as exonerees. And one of the reasons is, despite the hardship and financial issues, we also have to get people to accept responsibility in society to help change that. And this all revolves around that death penalty. Because had they not had that death penalty, I might not have been even convicted of something that I didn't do. Because one thing about it is that here in the United States, especially Florida, you have to have death qualified jurors. And every exoneration is one thing that's in common with all of them, and that's the jury made the wrong decision.
You shouldn't death qualify them though, because half the jury, once you pick a jury, the jury is people just like regular people walking around. They really don't understand all of that stuff, and that's why You should not death qualify a jury. Why would you do that? I mean, these are regular people. They walking around every day. Half of them probably don't know anything about the law. And then you take a group of people and you want them to judge over a case. Okay. But you give them certain stuff. You take stuff from them that they can't see. Expect them to make a decision. That doesn't make sense. You should not death qualify a jury. You should not give no one man the power to make the judgment as to what happens to somebody's life. Because that man could be mad. He could get, or woman, they can get mad with his wife and come to the courthouse and give you the death penalty or give you a life sentence. I don't think that should be either. I think that they should have it to where, I also think, and this might not sound right, but my feeling, just my personal opinion, when you have a victim and you have a person that is supposed to be done committed the crime, I don't think you should show the sex, the race, or anything of the victim. I think you should tell the charge. There should be no pictures of either one of them, so that people can make a just and right decision as to what's going on. I just think that that part should be held. Why do we need to know the race and all of that of the victim or the person that committed the crime? Because once you see that, then people that have their races or whatever going on, then you create a whole nother problem. You know what I'm saying? That's just my personal opinion. I just don't think that we should do what we're doing in society right now. And the reason that we are ousted, because I feel like we're their dirty little secrets. That's what I feel like. Nobody wants to say, hey, I'm wrong for what I done. That's the way I feel. That's my personal opinion, but I feel like that. And that's the reason why there are no programs or anything for us as an exoneree. We should have had mental health when we got out. We should have been gave apologies, housing, everything, because we didn't look up and say, hey, I want to go to death row. Will you please lock me up? Or will you please give me the death penalty? None of us said that. And so they should fix what they messed up. That's actually how I feel.
Got me stuck down. I mean, I'm sitting back and it's like, first of all, it's early in the morning. I'm drinking coffee out of a cup instead of a mug.
Yeah, I don't even have my coffee. I need my coffee.
Well, I'm a bit, but it's like I get emotional sometimes. It's like a feeling that I feel this. I feel this when we having discussions.
We're misunderstood. We're misunderstood. Well, I don't think it's really misunderstood. I just think it's hard for us to find our place. Where do we fit? Where do you fit? In all things, because if you have a relationship with a person, even in a love relationship, if that person hadn't went through what you have been through, then there's no way they're going to understand. And then that's when relationships break up. That person has to be done went through what you done went through in order to be able to, say, well, I know what you're talking about, or I'm there, or can sympathize. But it's hard for them to do that when they're not there. So I don't know.
Well, it's always hard for us to trust someone afterwards. It's
been through hell and back.
Yeah, I still have trust issues, but I put a boundary. But if you had to say some words to people of what to do, and I forgot to ask Mr. Binz for his report. So if anybody know how others can obtain the report from Mr. Binz for the 2022, can you put it in the chat or the Q&A?
Yeah, I would love to have that myself.
It is a very great. It's lengthy and pages, but it is a great start for those to actually read. It goes to the depths of torture.
I would love to read it. I would. Okay, somebody put it in there. Okay, yeah, I see it right here.
Yeah.
Will it be in English, or will we have to figure out how to get it?
Yeah, no, it's in English. You have an
It's
English
going to be in
version.
English. Okay. All right.
I
Cool.
remember right when he was doing the report. That's when I first met him in New York, and I was blown away from the discovery. And as you see, him and Mr. Méndez talked about such things on their conversation. And it's amazing how people taking their time out to really analyze this situation to
Yeah, that's
a
good.
fact
That's good.
where it's applying to something. You know, it's like here it is. You have this bad thing going on, and you try to justify it, but that bad thing ties into so many is so many violations.
Yeah.
You know, it's so many violations, and they still hold this one thing up, even though it's just violating people rights. They're violating the
Liberties,
rules.
everything.
You know,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
so I encourage people to actually read that report. You know, he analyzing and questioning of the death penalty. And there's no way a person can read that and turn around and say, hey, I'm still for the death penalty. Hey, the
Yeah.
death penalty is hard. There's no way a person.
Okay. So, does anybody have any questions? Any further questions? Do we have any?
I got a question right here. What reasons do the state give that have not officially abolished the death penalty, but suspend carrying out execution to keep death penalty around?
I
To
think
me,
that some of the states saying it because of the crime that's being committed, gun control, they don't have gun control and all of that. I really do, a lot of them don't make sense. Most of these states don't make sense as to why they keep it, to be honest.
it's their way of being tough on crime. Like I was just in Oklahoma on the moratorium, and one of the things I find Oklahoma standing on is because their forefathers used to do it. You know,
Yeah.
so they passing it down like they passing down a bull ring or something, you know, and that is inappropriate. Uh, Another thing I've heard is that they doing justice for the victim. To me, I think they're cheating the victim because if you put someone to death, that excuse them from all consequences here on earth. So, you know, we teach our kids that when people die, they go off to a better life. So it's like it's saying, okay, you know, going by the teaching, when I teach my kids, I'll just execute someone and send them off to a better life. It's many different things that they are using to try to justify it, but it's not right. But we'll be ending this meeting soon. I want to thank everyone that joined in and all the panelists for their time. I encourage everybody to follow the World Day Against the Death Penalty at the @WCADP on Twitter and at World Collision on Instagram. They will post a summary of the webinar on the website soon, worldcollision.org, and on the webinar on Facebook and YouTube if you want to watch it again. We'll also post that on witnessinnocent.org too, and all our social media. Also, I have time for like one or two more questions. Do anybody have any questions? So with that being said, if there's no more questions, I can go ahead and bring this to an end. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank everybody for coming. I want to thank the World Coalition for partnering with Witness Innocence and putting this webinar together. I think that we'll do more webinars in the future, and people will be able to ask our speakers a little bit more questions. But we are dedicated to this, and we thank everyone for their support, and for being here.
All right. Thank you, Herman. Thank you guys for having us. See you later. Bye.